ghost story that tells of the glories of Christmases long, long ago.
Welcome back to Ye Olde Panic Room, everyone. Yeah, welcome back to another Christmas video, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about a little bit of our roots with some old Victorian horror, specifically ghost stories. Now, before you run screaming for the hills, you know, sometimes I think it's nice to sort of be reminded of our roots. And what better time than around Christmas to have that happen, right? You know, I know that Victorian era literature stories is not everyone's cup of tea, but I would like to make the tiny little point here that without the people who wrote these ghost stories back in the day, which were rather risque for the time, we wouldn't have the transcendental horror we do now. We wouldn't have the crazy stories we do now. This was the birth of crazy, so to speak. You know, if you do even a little bit of Googling, you will know that the Victorians were out of their damn mind. They were crazy. They were nuts. A lot of the stuff, I mean, you know, beyond like half poisoning themselves with their toys and their makeup, you know, they just, did you know, okay, this is what kind of started my love affair with Victorian times. When I was in high school, I didn't play any instruments, I didn't sing, so I had to have a music credit. So I took general music all 4 years of high school. And we had a music teacher who would sometimes like to give us like interesting little facts. Now, I'm not going to fact check this because it's one of my fondest memories. She told us one time that Amadeus Mozart had this like penchant for filling up sheet bladders with helium and floating them into the rooms of his friends. And it was kind of like, okay, you know, I had a vlog 100,000 years ago where I talked about the story of King Midas and how it separates children, because you always have this group of children that think it would be really cool to touch things and have them turn to gold, and then you have this other group that always thinks it's horrifying. I was in the group that always thought it was horrifying, but I was also in the group in this particular music class that thought that it was just freaking hilarious to think about Mozart, this guy that makes this wonderful music that is beloved the world over, floating sheet bladders into a room and laughing about it. Still gets me to this day. And in my little quest to know more about the Victorian times, I have not been disappointed. There's a lot of really batshit insanity that happened back then, and these stories are sort of a glimpse into that. Now, are they chock full of blood and guts like we're used to reading? No. But if you put yourself in the time period, you know, you have these prim and proper ladies, you know, and you have these like gentlemanly guys, and this was like risque. You know, you had the time of spiritualists, which, by the way, how cool would that be? I would love just to have been the fly on the wall during like one of these spiritualism sessions. I mean, that whole thing fascinates me. So you had spiritualism at its height, so of course you're gonna have ghost stories come out of that. So what I read was volume 1 of the Valancourt book of Victorian Christmas ghost stories, but I want to say there's like 5 volumes now. And overall, I have to say this was a really solid read if you like this era of literature. And again, I think I have always just been so fascinated with, you know, the craziness of the Victorians, you know? I think maybe, and I don't know, maybe it's a product of where I grew up or how I was raised, you know, Christmas has always been sort of like presented as this like kid-friendly, you know, religious holiday, you know, not a whole lot of like spooky stuff happening. But even as a kid, if you listen to my Christmas opening, Scary Ghost Stories and Tells of the Glories of Christmases Long, Long Ago, to me that harkens back to these traditions of scaring the living hell out of your family when they come to visit for Christmas. I mean, I can get behind that. This book had a number of stories in it, some shorter than others, and I have to say there were some real gems and there were some like, some of them really dragged. And I don't even mean language-wise. I know that there are going to be some people out there that are like, I just can't read this crap. But for me, I don't know, there's just something about the language. It is absolutely magical. And it reminds me of why I fell in love with words. Now, I don't know how this movie is perceived. Don't really care. But as I was reading this, I was reminded of Robin Williams in the Dead Poets Society when he's explaining to the boys why they even had the Dead Poets Society. And he said that they didn't just read poetry, they let it drip from their tongues like honey. That is what these words do to me. So, as we go through this, I thought I could read you a little bit of those like honey-esque passages, but boy, are there some funny shit in here too. Oh my gosh. So let's start with the beginning. So a little bit of backstory. I know. Who do I think I am? Like Michael K. Vaughan or something? Here I am giving you backstory. No, it's not typical books. No, there is some wonderful little like tidbits, especially at the beginning of this book, about like the history of a lot of these stories, and most of them hail from like the 1800s. But the author of the introduction, Tara Moore, has a wonderful little blurb about like how to read Victorian ghost stories and how, you know, they were really written to sort of be shared with family, because that was the tradition, was scaring the shit out of your family when they came for Christmas. So, you know, they tell you like maybe think of that, or maybe even do that, like read them out loud to your family, share them. That's what these stories were written for. So I thought that was kind of neat too. So the very first story is called The Tapestried Chamber. All right. And I'm just going to give you the gist because this freaking cracked me up, and it was the first story in the whole book. So you have this guy, and he's a general in the army, badass, right? And he's coming back in to visit his buddy for Christmas. And his buddy's having like a bunch of people over because he just inherited this house. So the guy gets there and the buddy's like, hey, I'm going to put you in this room. And all the other guests are kind of acting a little squirrely about it. But he's like, no, it's fine. Don't listen to them. I want you to sleep in this room. Which, like, right off the bat, you as the reader, you're like, why? So then the next morning, it talks about how this, like, real grizzled, like, hardcore, badass general gets up, and he looks like absolute hell. Like, you could just tell he hasn't slept, and, like, he's talking about how, like, all the people are just trying to be, like, very prim and proper Victorian men and women and looking away and not saying anything. So his buddy asks at the breakfast table, hey, how'd you sleep? And he's like, because it's Victorian England, he says, oh, fine, I've never slept better in my entire life. Come on, that's hilarious, isn't it? Like, you got this guy that is just looking like death warmed over, and he's sitting here lying through his teeth at the breakfast table to save face. So the story goes that they go out on this patio, and the guy's like, dude, I gotta tell you, I didn't sleep at all. I don't know what's in your room, but something kept me awake. You know, I don't want you to think I'm nuts. And the friend's like, oh no, I know. You know, they told me the room was haunted, but, you know, I didn't really believe them. So I know you're a badass, so I wanted to put you in there so that if it haunted you, then I knew it was legit. So rather than getting mad, as most people I feel like would have, like, what the hell, man? The general is like, bro, thanks. I'm so glad you think I'm a badass. But that thing scared the shit out of me, and I'm never going back in that room. I laughed at that because, I mean, I was just like, some things never change. Like, I can see this playing out today. But it was just so funny to hear. And they were just so proper about it. It was hilarious. He's like, dude, thanks. You know, I'm glad you think I'm such a badass, but that shit's haunted. I loved it. It was great. Started off with a bang. So the next story was like Disney's Frozen, but thrown back to Victoria with a little bit of acid sprinkled over it and a lot more horror. So, yeah, it kind of, when it started, I was like, I don't know where this is going. But it was essentially about these two girls, and the younger girl has been orphaned, so the older girl is sort of taking care of her. And they go to live at this other, like, big Victorian mansion, and the story really centers around, like, this older girl finding out about the family through the servants. And yeah, you know, like, they hear these weird, like, piano, or I think it might even have been a harpsichord, which, how classic is that? And it talks about how, like, she hears it in the night, and she finds all these old portraits and stuff in the attic, which was very reminiscent of, like, some Dorian Gray action going on. But yeah, and you find out that it's like this family has all these secrets, and there's these two spinster-esque daughters that were beautiful, but really mean, and then the little girl starts seeing this, like, weird little girl ghost out in the snow trying to beckon her to come out. So now you have this mystery going on where this older girl is trying to figure out, you know, where the hell this little, like, ghost cold girl's coming from, which made me think of that Are You Afraid of the Dark episode where the little boy, you know, he's like, I'm cold. Yeah, that one. So you find out that, obviously, spoilers, you find out that the family had this whole, like, I don't know, scandal where one of the sisters was turned out by her own father because she was going to have a baby with this guy that wasn't, like, I guess, up to snuff for the family. And they ended up dying, and now there's like this bitter ass ghost that wants back into the family now, and the father's half crazy because he sees it. And yeah, but let me read you the end and tell me if this is not horrifically beautiful. Okay, so to set the scene for you, the older girl's name is Hester, and she's trying to hold on to this little girl to keep her from running out into the storm to get to this little, like, ice girl. But the ghosts are done. Like, they want to get at this dad for turning her out and killing her and her child all those many years ago. So, listen to this. Just listen to the beauty of this. When she saw the uplifted crutch, she swooned away, and I thank God for it. Just at this moment, when the tall old man, his hair streaming as in the blast of a furnace, was going to strike the little shrieking child, Miss Furnival, the old woman by my side, cried out, "Father, Father, spare the innocent child." But just then I saw, as we all did, another phantom shape itself, and grow clear out of the blue and misty light that filled the hall. We had not seen her till now, for it was another lady who stood by the old man, with a look of relentless hate and triumphant scorn. That figure was very beautiful to look upon, with a soft white hat drawn down over the proud brow, and a red curling lip. It was dressed in an open robe of blue satin. I had seen that figure before. It was the likeness of Miss Furnivall in her youth, and the terrible phantom moved on, regardless of old Miss Furnivall's wild entries, and the uplifted crutch fell on the right shoulder of the little child, and the younger sister looked on, stony and deadly serene. But at that moment the dim lights and the fire that gave no heat went out of themselves, and Miss Furnivall lay at our feet, struck down by the palsy, death-stricken. Please, don't let me ruin this for you, because there's a lot more to this story. There is a lot more, like, family intrigue. You know, there's, like, some love triangle shit going on. It's amazing. But tell me, is that not just, beautiful? Like, can you not just see the old man with his hair, you know, flying back, and that look of hate on that old Victorian lady's face? I loved it. I loved it. I thought it was just so beautifully written, that visual. Can you not imagine just a Victorian family gathered around a fire? You know, you got like a Christmas tree back here, you know, maybe the mom is doing some sewing or something, and that being read out of a newspaper. Because, you know, I learned this in a lot of little blurbs. Like, these were published in, like, newspapers and different, like, magazines and periodicals of the time. Yeah, can you just imagine that? Imagine, like, the darkness, true darkness, not like what we have today with, like, streetlights and storefronts and all kinds of things, but, like, darkness with only candlelight or firelight, and that being read to you. That's amazing. That's what I mean about how, like, to me, this whole thing was, like, revisiting horror roots. You know, like, without stuff like this, you would never have, you know, the Jack Ketchums of today, at least in my humble opinion. And so the next story, I absolutely love the title. It's just called Horror, A True Tale. And it was written by John Harwood, who died in 1899. And yeah, so this story was kind of, you know, a lot of these stories seem to be very sensationalized, you know, kind of like trying to draw the reader in, kind of like clickbait for the Victorian era. So yeah, the little blurb at the beginning is just talking about how, you know, the fact that they tacked on a true tale really just kind of drew people in, like, oh wow, you know, this is real, this isn't made up. So this story, I have to say, I'm not going to say that it was a true tale, but it was probably one of the most awesome in the whole collection, in my opinion. And it had some of the best, I guess, descriptions of the action. It's told from the perspective of, like, this old woman who is kind of telling her family how she got to be the way she is, and how she used to be this young and beautiful thing, but how she's, you know, this one night changed her whole life and her whole outlook and everything. And essentially it's about this encounter that she has with this entity, and how, you know, it turns her into this, like, old woman, and it takes her beauty, and, you know, she was coming from a rich family, and it come to find out, like, the guy that she was getting ready to marry only wanted her for her money and all of this. But let me read you the description of the entity, okay? Again, this is not spoilers. Like, you should totally read this. The language and the eloquence is just absolutely breathtaking in this story. It is so good, and it is such a wonderful example of what I've been saying this whole time about how without stories like this, we would not have the horror that we love today. Okay, so this description comes after a night where she has been hearing this entity. She's been hearing like chains rattling and growling and breath on her neck and just all of this wonderful, glorious buildup. And you finally get to hear her description of this entity. Now take this as a spoiler if you want, but again, I don't think that these stories are necessarily spoilery because they're not like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming. You read these for the eloquence of the language, to me, largely. And yeah, they are ghost stories. And for those of us who have read countless books, you are going to see these things played out. What I want to really stress with this video is just the beauty of these stories and maybe encourage you to kind of like, again, go back to your roots and see. But let's listen to what this entity looks like after this night of just absolute terror that this girl went through. There it lay, a gaunt, gigantic form, wasted to a skeleton, half-clad, foul with dust and clotted gore. Its huge limbs flung upon the couch as if at random, its shaggy hair streaming over the pillows like a lion's mane. Its face was towards me, all the wild hideousness of that face, even in its sleep. In its feature it was human, even though its horrid mask of mud and half-dried bloody gout was the expression of a brutish and savagely fierce beast. The white teeth were visible between the parted lips in a malignant grin. The tangled hair and beard were mixed in confusion, and there were scars disfiguring the brow. Round the creature's waist was a ring of iron, to which was attached a heavy but broken chain. The chain I had heard clinking. With a second glance I noted that part of the chain was wrapped in straw to prevent it from galling the wearer. The creature, I cannot call it a man, had the marks of fetters on its wrists. The bony arm that protruded through one tattered sleeve was scarred and bruised. The feet were bare and lacerated by pebbles and briars, and one of them was wounded and wrapped in a morsel of rag. And the lean hands, one of which held to my sleeve, were armed with talons like an eagle. In an instant the horrid truth flashed upon me. I was in the grasp of a madman. Is that not glorious? I mean, I was just taken aback with the absolute beauty of that. This was written in the 1880s. Tell me that isn't just the absolute granddaddy of like Stephen King. Come on. That is absolutely beautiful. Beautiful. And I know I'm talking to a group of horror lovers, so I feel like you get what I'm saying. Like, it's just riveting to read something like that and to see, you know, the absolute eloquence of the language put to a medium that we all enjoy, which is horror and spooky stuff, right? Okay, guys, so the next story is called Bring Me a Light. And okay, there's one part in this that I have to tell you about, but the story itself is really good. It's, again, of course, it's a ghost story, but it's centered around this like mom who wants the best for her son, which seems to be an underlying thing here, which makes sense. You know, you have, you know, the eloquent, what do they call it, bourgeoisie, and they're rich and they're powerful and they want all these good things for their family. So you see that kind of threaded through most of these stories about like the rich versus the poor. And, you know, side note, there is a little bit of not politically correct speech in some of these stories. Not terrible, like not a lot, but enough. And this particular story is, you know, really centered around one of these ladies who just thinks that, you know, the sun rises and sets in her son's behind, and this woman that he brings home, even though she's beautiful and eloquent, is not good enough. So, you know, antics ensue. But there's this one part where, because like she has the son fooled thinking that she's okay with this girl, and there's this one part where the girl comes in and I think they're getting ready to go to a dance or something, and the son is convinced that the mom will not give her a compliment if she knows that the son's there, because he thinks, oh, she's just going to do it to humor me. I want to see how she deals with you, you know, by yourself. So he tells her, Mom's upstairs. Why don't you go see her and, you know, I'll sneak up after you. But listen to how this is phrased. You must go to my mother and let her see how lovely you look. Walk first, that I might see how you look behind. Go on ahead of me. I'm gonna make sure you look all right from behind, baby. Come on. I had to laugh. I thought that was funny. Maybe it's just me. So anyway, antics ensue from the mom, and, you know, there's like an heir that is being told this story that comes back to the house, and, you know, yeah, he ends up kind of like a happily ever after sort of deal. Anyway, it's a very good story. But that whole thing about go ahead, baby, and let me see how you look from behind, I had to laugh at that. This is the 1880s, and God love Victorians. I love it. You know, some things never change. So there's another story I wanted to mention called Old Hooker's Ghost. And nothing really much about the story kind of jumps out at me. Again, all of these are very eloquently written. Some drag a little bit more than others as far as plot goes, but in Old Hooker's Ghost, there were two things that I wanted to mention. One was a word that I absolutely loved, and it's denuded. Like, look at that tree denuded of leaves. Right? Can we bring that back? I love that, denuded. And the second thing was a phrase. So the next part is it's talking about how like they're in this battle and there's this medicine that they need to take, and the captain, and I quote, this is what the captain tells his men when he gives them out this medicine: take some of this riffraff up thy sniff-snaff. Take some of this riffraff up thy sniff-snaff. I laughed. I don't know why. I thought it was funny. Something about taking riffraff up your sniff-snaff. Again, some of these stories, I have to say, did sort of drag a little bit. There was one towards the end called The Captain of the Pole Star, where it's set on this like big old ship. You know, if you like pirates, you know what I'm talking about. Like those descriptions of just the beautiful woodwork and, you know, the sails and the smell of the rope. Oh, beautiful. But this particular vessel is caught in like an ice lake, river. You know, it's essentially that's like kind of where this, you know, chaos takes place, is that they're stuck, and it's kind of written like this guy's journal, and he wants to get home to his, you know, his fiance and all this, and how the captain is slowly losing his mind. And, you know, there's some elements of like, I guess like Mer lore, kind of, sort of, not in your face, but, you know, that sort of sprinkled in there. But the way it describes the ice and like the sun setting and reflecting off of it, and how you can see the green water kind of lapping underneath it, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. You could almost, again, kind of going back to what Robin Williams said, you could almost taste the sweetness of the words. It is just absolutely amazing, the use of the language. The last story I wanted to talk about kind of more in detail was the last story in the book, and it was The Doll's Ghost. Okay, so for those of you who are fans of like Chucky, this is like the grandmother of those kind of stories. Now, full disclosure, I've never really liked the whole Chucky thing. The whole idea of dolls coming to life just never really did it for me. I get it because I do like Uncanny Valley stuff, and I can totally see where dolls fit the bill for that, but this story, oh, so good. It's so good. It's centered around like this doll maker and his obsession with his chosen field. And again, call it spoilers if you want, but you essentially have him like becoming obsessed with this one particular doll, like trying to fix her because she's been broken. And he sends his daughter, who's like 12, out to take the doll back because he can't bear to part with it. And the daughter never comes back. So then you get this, and I tell you what, it was almost reminiscent of like the madness in The Telltale Heart from Poe. You know, he's hearing like these knocks and these sounds and things like this. But the creepiest part is this particular doll, and I'm assuming that dolls did this, and I don't know, not a connoisseur of like doll lore or anything, but this particular doll that we're talking about in the story, like you do like her right arm up and down and she'll say mama, and her left arm up and down and she'll say papa. And he starts to hear that. And so you're kind of left as the reader wondering. And mind you, this was a very short story. This was only like 5 to 7 pages, I want to say. The book's on my Kindle, so it's a little hard to tell. And come to find out, the doll is coming after the guy to lead him to his daughter, who essentially got mugged and is in a hospital, like ages and ages away. Now, it's not really went into as to how she got to this particular hospital, but yeah. And then what I thought was just a nice little, at the end of the story, he finds the daughter, and the daughter's like, oh, Papa, I'm so sorry. I think, you know, the doll got shattered. And he's like, no, the doll, she's fine. And so he opens the box to like see the doll. Doll shattered, completely shattered. So it makes you wonder, like, was it like her spirit? Was she really alive? Like, it's so well done. It's so good. And again, I can totally see this story being told to a group of Victorian children. You know, the little girls holding on to dolls and maybe they clutch them a little tighter and look at them a little weirder, you know? It's just, oh, so good. So let me read you a little section. This is, again, just a little part of the stuff that he starts hearing, you know, and you don't know, is he really hearing it? Is he just upset about his kid not coming home? Something was following him in the dark. There was a small pattering, as of tiny feet upon the boards. He stopped and listened, and the roots of his hair tingled. It was nothing, and he was a foolish old man. He made 2 steps more, and he was sure he heard the pattering again. He turned his back to the window, leaning against the sash so that the pane began to crack, and he faced the dark. Everything was quiet still, and the smell of paste and cement and wood fillings filled the air as usual. Can you just see, like, this is so much a precursor to all of the stuff that we read now. Everything that you see reviewed on BookTube, all of these wonderful horror and thriller and mystery novels, you know, you see these elements in here, and it's done so beautifully. So beautifully. So if you are a lover of language, you know, words in general, especially I feel like if you are a writer, like I really think that stuff like this will just feed your absolute little dark soul. So guys, I know this was probably a little bit more of like a wordy video, but truthfully, I wanted to get this out there in time to give you guys time to maybe get your hands on this and read it, because, you know, I feel like the only thing we really get into this time of year is A Christmas Story, and while that is a wonderful classic, there's so much good shit out there, especially for those of us in the darker part of literature. You know, Victorian times were just chock full of insanity, and I think this book gives a wonderful little taste of some of that. So thank you so much for coming back to the Panic Room. I hope you guys enjoyed this Christmas video. I know I absolutely loved this. This just made me want to, I don't know, drink all the tea. Anyway, guys, if you like this, please like and subscribe. It would really help me out. And until next time, bye for now.